Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and we're going to be going over this article on Twitter from uh, Ivor Coy, and it's talking about how China has managed to break through on 7 nanometer semiconductors. And we thought that China would not get to 7 nanometer semiconductors for probably another decade, really, because they were so many generations behind. I believe just a couple of years ago, they were at 28 nanometers, and getting from 28 to 7 nanometers is a lot of work. However, over the past few years, China has made a very concerted effort to have the entire supply chain for semiconductors be domestic. And it looks like Huawei, despite all of the sanctions that America has put on it, has managed to succeed at getting the 7 nanometer technology. And I believe 7 nanometers is either 1 or 2 generations behind the highest tier of commercial semiconductor technology. 2 nanometer is a pretty big milestone as well, and I think there might be 1 generation after 2 nanometer. But we're going to read on about how did China manage to successfully overcome all of these sanctions against it. So the Chinese tech giant Huawei created its 7 nanometer technology despite harsh United States sanctions. Over the past 4 years, the United States has enacted over 100 separate sanction regulations targeting the Chinese company. So that's just one company within China. They have over 100 separate sanctions regulations put on them. That's extremely stringent, and it should tell you about the direction of this next cycle. Okay? If you've watched Ray Dalio's Changing World Order at all, you know that empires rise and fall in cycles, and the last major cycle was the handing off of the torch from the United Kingdom to the United States of America. And that was a peaceful handing off because United Kingdom saw United States as another Anglo-Saxon empire that was much bigger and could handle being the global hegemon, the sole superpower. However, the handing off or the passing of the torch between the declining empire of the United States and the rising faction, the rising nation of China, is not as peaceful because the United States really does not want to give up its mantle as the world power, the sole superpower. United Kingdom just realized that given their population size and given how tiny they were, that there was just no way for them to continue on doing what they were doing. But the United States still believes that because of its huge size, the massive amount of resources it has, that it should be able to still be the superpower, at least for a little bit longer. In terms of how cycles go, this is actually kind of a funny one because typically nations stay superpowers for a little bit longer than the United States has. And it's the reason it's so funny is because people think that, and I grew up in America, people think that America is kind of like divinely ordained to be the superpower of the world for the rest of eternity. And when you look at it, it's actually declining a lot faster than other prior empires who have been the sole superpower. So the United States is declining, and they have a very hostile relationship with the rising power. So this is a very different situation than prior times when a superpower was declining and another was rising. And I should also mention that people, and I've talked about this with people in the comment section, people think that this decline is going to be linear because of how linear the decline of the United Kingdom was, but it's not going to be linear for a number of different reasons. One is we don't really have the gold standard anymore, and so without the gold standard and without our currencies meaning much tangibly, the United States has just been able to print money until people realize that their currency is not of value. Whereas the United Kingdom, their currency was actually of value tangibly, they just couldn't maintain that value over time. Whereas the United States isn't actually maintaining any value, they're just maintaining the illusion of value. And once that illusion goes away, which I think will go away once it reaches a tipping point, then it's going to plummet very, 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 very fast, particularly since it has a hostile relationship as I mentioned, with the other power in the world that is on the rise, be the sole superpower, which is China. And so United States has a lot of things that are going poorly for it. And I do not believe that for the factors I just mentioned, I do not believe it's going to be a linear decline, a slow descent. It's going to reach a tipping point where people recognize that United States just is not producing things of value anymore. And then people are going to quit using United States goods. And so that's the end of the United States at that point. If United States goods aren't being used anymore, then United States really just has nothing to offer the rest of the world. Okay, let's see here. United States has enacted sanctions. Okay, between 2019 and 2023, the United States, the world's preeminent hegemon, applied 6 separate rounds of sanctions against Huawei. Huawei is prohibited from using any U.S. components or intellectual property in its products. Okay, so there's a number of things to go over just with that sentence. So if you're not allowing United States components and intellectual property to be used, then that means that they're just going to create their own, and they're going to make domestic the various parts of their supply chain, particularly since other sanctions have made it so other countries can't make products using Chinese components. And what those other companies and other countries end up doing is they would decide between American components and Chinese components. And since America doesn't really make overly much of value anymore, they end up taking American components out of the supply chain instead of Chinese components out of the supply chain. So these types of sanctions have not worked, and they only do work whenever the nation is actually powerful enough that other countries would want to use their components and products, which is not the case currently with America. Meng Wanzhou, daughter of Huawei's founder, was abducted and held in custody for 1,028 days. Under such pressure, the Chinese tech giant might cave to American pressures by kowtowing to Washington, selling over its most valuable technologies, and allowing itself to be taken over, like the United States did the French firm Alstom. Okay, so the United States has done this before. They've made sure that even their own allies are not able to overcome them. Japan is a colony of America. It's completely dominated. It's a puppet of America. And Japan was rising, particularly in about the 1980s, and the United States just cut them off at the knees. They really made sure that Japan would not be a competitor to the United States. And so the United States does this. And another funny thing in this sentence is they say that they want to have China sell over their most valuable technologies. And the funny thing is, people always talk about how China's copying this, China's copying that. Well, I mean, you wouldn't need to have them sell over their most valuable technologies if they make nothing of value, right? So this is just tapping into the fact that China is clearly making a lot of things of value, and the United States is just propagandizing its own people to pretend like China doesn't actually make things, they just steal things. Okay, below are excerpts from interviews CBS and CNBC conducted with Huawei's CEO Ren Zhengfei in 2019, when the United States first levied sanctions on Huawei. 4 years later, Ren's predictions have been spot on. Let's see what he had to say. When I heard that the U.S. had put us on the entity list, I wasn't very surprised because we were mentally prepared, but I did not believe it will endanger our survival. Okay, that's good. It's good to have confidence. Hopefully it's backed up by something. If you don't sell your product to a company, you're actually forcing it to make similar product one day, and you will not be able to sell your product any longer. Yeah, that's exactly the case. So you've shown that you're not a trustworthy trade partner, so people aren't going to trade with you. And not only the country that you're screwing over, but other countries are going to see that you're not a trustworthy trade partner, particularly since China has not been aggressive whatsoever. And they're going to say, well, we don't want to trade with America either. And then China, given the fact that they can't get these components and products from the United States anymore, they're going to create their own products and services and components. We need to change our employees' mindsets as we are not in peacetime anymore. We are more united and aligned than before thanks to these external pressures. Okay, so we know this about organizations. We know this about countries, that whenever there's an external threat, people tend to rally, unify, unless they actually consider themselves to be a part of separate tribes, which we saw during the COVID pandemic, that the right and left in America, they actually considered themselves to be separate tribes, and instead of uniting, behind an external threat. They actually united against each other and the external threat to a certain extent, but mostly against each other. And so that just shows you how divided America is, which should be very, very, very concerning for people, because that's a level of mental decoupling that is something it's hard to come back from once you have mentally decoupled from the other tribe to that extent. Within 2 years, Huawei, our broken plane, will be completely repaired. In 3 years, you'll see a new plane. It would probably have more advanced engines to fly faster. Okay, so they're saying it's not going to take overly long to overcome the sanctions. I think the whole restructuring within the organization should be completed within 3 to 5 years, and that's exactly what they found. How many years ago was this? 4 years later. Okay, so yes, he was right, within 3 to 5 years. So that's a very successful prediction. We want to delegate the decision-making power to our experts. The last thing we want is to have bureaucrats or managers lead our way in technology. Wow, that's very different from the United States, where companies are just led by this middle management, bureaucracy, garbage, red tape. The fact that they have actual technical experts in leadership positions who are making the final decisions is extremely important for the success of their company. So we've decided that our managers should do administrative affairs and leave technology-related decisions to experts. It would be nice if that was the case in other Western nations, but it's very clearly not. We're open to licensing all of your 5G technology to Western firms for a one-off fee. Everything, even chipsets, whatever you want to buy, we can discuss. We provide everything without reservation. We won't hide some source code. They can have everything and they can improve on the basis of our work. Okay, that's really important there, because that tells us that China is extremely confident that they're going to continue to innovate. If they're willing to open things up to everyone, then that tells you they aren't afraid. They aren't afraid that this is going to be their last innovation, that this is going to be their last success, because they're saying, like, well, we don't need to hold on to this. We don't need to hide this. We can make this available to everyone. That also makes them a better trading partner, a more valuable trading partner, because you know that they're trustworthy and they're very transparent, which is exactly the opposite of what Western propaganda would tell you. They're far more transparent about how they do things than America is. And you see that from this quote here. Perhaps the United States believes this will serve them better in negotiations or talks, but we don't want to sacrifice national interest for ourselves. National interest is about the poor and their products. We're already well off. We cannot ask the poor to save us, so we think we should just withstand these blows from the United States. Okay, so they don't want to cave to the United States. Encircling the cities from rural areas is the famous philosophy of revolution by Mao Zedong, which believes revolution should start in places where obstructing forces are weak, the rural areas, and then enter more challenging places, the cities, after power growth in the former place. Huawei is currently guiding its development within this theory. The West does not represent the entire world. We still have the East, South, and North without the West. Huawei's chip success is evidence that the West's promotion of hegemony and sanctions will backfire on itself. Okay, yeah, I completely agree with all of that. And it's interesting talking about where does revolution occur, and he's talking about how it occurs within rural areas and then spreads to the cities, because there's less restrictions on the rural areas, whereas the cities are completely dominated by whatever the propaganda machine is of that country. And that's exactly what you see in the United States as well. Hope the Chinese transfer the technology to the world and make it free for everyone. America would claim. Oh, okay. So I think that's just a comment from someone. All right, so interesting stuff here. It's very cool to see how successful China has been, and there's been recent talks about how China can mass produce 7 nanometer semiconductor chips. And if you're in the market for buying a CPU or GPU or anything that requires chips, know that in the next few years, these semiconductor chips are going to be far, far, far cheaper. And so the cost of these various products are going to go down. So I made a content creation computer a couple months ago now, and I'm not going to update this computer until the mass production of chips occurs from China, unless, of course, something breaks, obviously. But China is very clearly going to overwhelm the market and take market shares away from the current leaders because they're domesticating the entire supply chain within China so that they can be resilient to future sanctions from the United States and from the rest of the West. Okay, so that is the end of our video. If you like this video, please provide us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content. We are making one long-form video per day currently, and that's a really nice pace. It allows us to talk about current events. It allows us to go over various reactions to Twitter posts and articles, things like that. And so I'm sticking with that. And so if you want to see once a day, geopolitics news, contemporary topics within society, things that I feel like you should know, and I think I'm pretty good at discerning what is important to know, then please subscribe to our channel. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, please let me know in the comment box. I know I have a few regulars right now, and it's interesting to see their regular comments. I have one person from Serbia, another person who's apparently a teacher, things like that. So I thank all of you for your continued engagement with our channel. I'm certainly not going to give up on this because it's been very interesting for me. So thank you for sticking with us, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.